can. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 18th, 2025 meeting of the Infrastructure and Energy Committee. This meeting of the Barnstable Infrastructure and Energy Committee is being recorded and will be posted for future viewing on the Town of Barnstable website. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make such a recording or transmission must notify the chair. Anybody? Anybody? All right, Barry, over to you.
Okay, we're good. Why don't we start with going over the minutes from the last meeting, which was February 10th. So, does anyone have a question about those minutes?
Yeah, I have a few, just like wordsmithing, nothing
Okay,
big, but
Jane, you're coming in a little faint. Maybe if you could increase your volume there. At least I'm not hearing you that well.
okay, let me see. Where is my volume? Huh. Where is it? Do I adjust it on the audio in the lower left corner? Where do I adjust my volume? Do you know?
In the lower left corner, if
Okay.
you click the arrow that's
Yep.
next to the, and then
Yep.
audio settings,
Okay.
and then you should see speaker, test speaker, blah blah blah, and then microphone input level, and then that volume button next to it should be full.
Should be full.
Oh, there we are.
Is that okay?
That is great.
We can
No,
hear you much better, Jane.
That's perfect.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, all good.
I don't know
So-
how that happened. Anyway,
what-
let me, there are just, I think page 2, there was, let me see where I am with this. I found a few things. It's just wordsmithing. The second paragraph under where it says Infrastructure and Energy Committee, I'll talk on public health and Chris will talk, and then 3 lines down, it's just a wordsmithing. It said it should be ward added instead of warded add. You see that star back in 2019?
I see that. Chris, do you see that?
Sorry, I realized I had the wrong minutes up.
Yeah, so
Let me see.
Okay. So on page 2.
Yep, I found it.
Yeah, that's a good catch, Jane. Anything else?
Yeah, down almost to the bottom, the second line from the bottom, it says where we're talking about clarifying how many buildings are going to be typically required to meet the stretch code per year. And it says at the end of the paragraph, I feel that it focuses on a fairly small number. That shouldn't follow the couple sentences about municipal buildings. It should follow, it should come on the third line after how many are built each year in the town, which this would apply. And then I feel that that's a small
So
number.
that sentence would come after how many buildings are there that are built each year in the town in which this would apply.
Right.
And then after that, Ward feels this focuses on a fairly small number.
Right.
Okay. You got that, Chris?
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. And then on the next page, I don't think it's a change. I just highlighted where we're talking on the same theme. The bottom of the first paragraph is just re-emphasizing the same thing. We think it's going to be a small number of buildings, but that's okay. I don't think that needs to be updated at all. And then on page 4, there's under air quality monitoring D. It's just a small wordsmithing.
Okay, what
talks
is it?
About the big difference between the base code and the stretch code is ventilation upgrades to bring in outside air. not external bringing in outside air, but the
Okay,
big
so
step
that's-
up between the base code and the stretch code is ventilation that brings in outside air.
Yeah, so anybody who wants a change to the minutes, just please, you can explain it, but suggest the specific language. So,
Okay.
so
It
what
could
is
just
this?
be, specific language can be, the big difference between the base code and the stretch code is ventilation that brings in outside air.
Okay,
You got that?
got it.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Does anyone else have any other suggested changes? Well, I would say, I'd ask whether, with the changes that Jane has suggested, whether we have a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Okay,
A
second,
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes. Yeah, so I just note we've got Gordon Starr and who's our liaison to the town council. We have, it looks like we have Councilor Kristen Turkelson, who's joining us as well.
Hi, Gordon and Kristen.
Good afternoon, Jane. How are you?
Good.
Great,
Good to see you, Kristen.
good to see you. All right, so okay, let's go to old business. So Green Communities, a workshop planning, I'll speak to that. So I guess after the last meeting, I met with Mark Ells, just in terms of planning for the workshop. And so I think we talked about the workshop and then what to bring before the town council. And we also talked about having a planning meeting in which we'd have people from our committee and David Anthony and John Hogan and Brian Florence. So I think when I met with Mark Ells, I had and I'll go over what I learned at this follow-up meeting. My understanding was that other than the stretch code, that really of the other criteria, it was just the plan to have to reduce energy by 20% over 5 years in municipal buildings. That was the other outstanding thing, but I thought from prior discussions that that was fairly advanced. When we met, so what I learned from David Anthony was there's still quite a bit of work to do. And I know that Sean Hogan is working on whether to, I know what David suggested, rather than, at some follow-up meeting from the workshop seeking approval of the stretch code, is to get a sense that the town council would support moving forward with the work that would need to be done to bring it before the town council, which would be sometime after. And I followed, I think David Anthony's on. And so one of the things trying to get some what, the amount of time that it would take. Brian Florence attended the meeting and he said he did not want to participate in the workshop. I'm going to follow up with Mark Ells and see if that presents any issues. I was a bit surprised. So that's where things are at. Now, I'm also talking to, so DOER is going to present two speakers, one on the Green Communities Program and one on the stretch code. I am speaking with Chris Mazzol, who's a PERS rater and supposed to be very experienced, talking to him tomorrow and see whether he would be interested in speaking. He's been recommended, I think, by 3 different people. Let's see. I'll probably continue to speak to number of other people who are builders or HERS raters or people who've had experience with the process. So that's where I'm at. I am going on a vacation in a couple of days, and we'll be back for our next meeting, which is March 10th. Chris, I think I circulated an outline before. I've met with our own Chris Gloninger, who will be giving a short talk on climate science and how that relates to the town's policy really to minimize GHG emissions, as well as the state sort of the decarbonization mandate. Maybe Jane, if I could ask you to put together, I guess before I go into that, the other thing that was significant, this was again David Anthony's suggestion, which I think we should adopt, but we had asked for an hour and a half of time to do this workshop, and to make sure that we don't lose people's attention. Plus, there's ample time for answering questions. David suggested we try to limit the presentations to about 45 to 50 minutes in time. So I've talked to DOER for their 2 presenters, and between them, we're looking at 15 minutes. That's what I allocated to them. And I think Chris 5 minutes, maybe Jane 5 minutes on public health, but so it'll be, we're trying to make this punchy. So I've put, I think I would do the introduction. I have 3 slides. It'll be less than 5 minutes. And Jane, maybe if you could put together something that at least an outline is what you want to talk about. And I think Chris, when I get back, maybe Kelly or you could help us we have different people putting together different slides, and maybe make them, to the extent we can, have at least if it's done by either folks from our committee or the town, have a similar format.
Yeah, that can be done.
Okay. So that's what I have. So any questions or discussion?
No, I think that's good. I think we need to try to have as short and to the point. I mean, any one of these talks could be the whole hour, so we have to really work to try to hit the key points. And I was just thinking, Chris Gloninger, since you've done so much work with sea level rise, modeling sea level rise, I mean, I kind of feel like that's a huge piece of, beside the fact that we've already basically said that we've declared a climate emergency. It's a little bit different wording, but we have that is that going to be part of your introduction, Barry? that the town council, and that was another thing David Anthony said, to remind them that this was their declaration of a climate emergency. This was the town council declaration of a climate emergency that we're responding to with this consideration of green communities. But I just think that, that the sea level rise threat is
I mean,
tremendous.
let me, I can share kind of what I was planning to use for this, for an introduction is basically summarize the green communities as a state program that provides, order of hundreds of thousands of dollars for municipal energy efficiency and decarbonization projects. There are 5 criteria, including the energy reduction plan and the adopting the stretch code, and that the green communities designation would advance the 2020 town council policy to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions to 0 to the extent feasible. And this was done in recognition that this climate emergency is driven by human consumption and land use practices. Mentioned the stretch code was brought before the town council in 2021. It did not pass due to a tie vote. It came up a couple of times before and did not move forward. That Barnstable is the only town on Cape Cod that has not adopted the stretch code and received green communities designation. And then to answer why should we consider addressing or adopting the stretch code and becoming a green community now. And the points that I would make is, more experience with HERS raters and the use of the performance-based stretch energy code. Changes in state law requiring greenhouse gas reductions and focusing on electrification, commercialization of cold climate heat pumps, and the Cape Light Compact mass save incentives that focus on that. The economics have become more attractive, and that, including the recent changes to the stretch code with respect to scope, more lenient standards, and more flexibility. So that, and then I was going to introduce the speakers and what they're going to talk to. So that would be the introduction that I was planning on, obviously.
So Barry, can I jump in? I would just say, make sure that you talk about the benefits to the town in terms of initial $220,000 and then yearly grants to improve the infrastructure of our buildings to make them more energy efficient, which would save us money yearly.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to touch on that,
Good.
and
Okay.
maybe I'll do more, but I think that's where David Anthony is going
Okay.
to. Where we also asked Brian Florence, although he says he does not want to speak, that we asked for data that his department would have over the last 2 years, how many building permits have been issued for say new homes that would be subject to the stretch code going forward. New ones would be, as well as renovations that going forward would be subject to the stretch code, which presumably there'd be fewer in number.
Right.
And this was just to get a sense of the scope of it. What he said was to get the data be pretty easy. To do on renovations maybe would be more difficult, and I can appreciate that because you have to really go into it, take the square footage, exclude finishing off attics and basements, and so and maybe even more to that. So anyway, so he's looking into that.
Hey,
So,
Barry,
yeah, go ahead.
you don't get, it's not a yearly grant for green communities. It's, you put it first year, yeah, you basically get it, but after that you have to submit for it, and the average is around 8 years between grants.
Yeah, it's competitive. I think they have rules. I don't know, Yeah, and answering is a little more complicated because in the past it wasn't competitive. It has become, but apparently what I hear is that if you make qualifying proposals, the great majority are adopted. But once you get them, I think, Rob, that you have to wait 2 years until you get your next grants. So yeah, there are limitations, but other the dollars, it's going to be over 200,000 to begin with, and looking forward is probably hundreds of $1,000s more over a period of years. I think that's
I think we can find the data for what the other towns on the Cape have gotten since they've been green communities. That
we
amount of
have
money is out in the green community, in their program website.
So maybe in this we've got maybe Lisa Sullivan of DOER who will be speaking and has that data, could mention, for example, Mashpee as an example of a neighboring community that's gotten grants. All that's public. You're right, it's public information. And just from a process standpoint, DR said they'll give us their presentations in advance, and even before that, we can suggest points that we'd like them to include. That being one of them. But I think they could do that. David Anthony could do that.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
You've asked Brian Florence for the information. It sounds like if we just got the number of single-family homes from the last couple of years that have been built, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and
I would say, don't ask Brian Florence. I would say ask Mark Else, or at least send a request to both of them.
Yeah, I plan to circle back with Mark. Brian didn't give me any. I'll just mention that that's what we asked for, and he said he could provide it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think it is an important point that Gordon brought up, that we really want to emphasize why are we doing it, because of the benefits going forward, and the fact that, just recently, was it last week, that the program became more flexible. So some of the pushback, some of the concerns, let me say, from 21 are no longer there. They've made the program more flexible because a lot of communities had input like that they wanted it to be more flexible.
Yeah. So I would say the amendments, probably about 80% of it went to the additions and renovations, and my sense, and I talked to the rep from the home builders side, they were happy with the changes that were made. There were several other changes that went beyond that. So there have been problems with the passive home pathway so basically you go through a design and testing where the testing was substantially performing, but not to 100%. Members of the industry asked for like a substantial performance standard.
Is that too much in the weeds for this presentation?
And, show that you tried. Pardon?
I just wonder if this is I've struggled to figure this out, and I've been paying attention to it on and off for several years. I just wonder, we don't want to get into too many of the exceptions. I mean, we don't. But you're just telling us, but that wouldn't need to be part of the workshop in a 5-minute.
No, and in fact, I don't know if there, as far as I can tell, whether there would be many passive home applications in Barnstable.
No.
But the other thing is they did loosen the standard for ceiling insulation, which would apply to new as well as projects as well as renovations. So, Ron, did you have a question? Did I answer it? I'm trying to.
No, I didn't. I might have raised
Okay.
my hand, but no.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, no.
So
Okay.
so
Sure.
so what is the goal of having this workshop? What do we want the town council to do?
The goal of the workshop?
Yes.
Well, the goal of the workshop
What's
is,
the change we want the town council to make?
well, I mean, I think ultimately, I think it's the sense of the committee that they'd like the stretch code to be adopted and for the town to be a green community. In terms of how we get there, based on the updated information that we got,
Yeah.
it's a little unclear.
So can I say that I think
Notion bringing it up for a vote straight up on the stretch code,
right.
perhaps at the next meeting, makes sense because the uncertainty around getting an energy plan together and the timing. So my plan is to over the next couple of days before I go on vacation is to get back with Mark Ells and make sure that he is aware of this, because it was not my understanding when I met with him before. So and how that is going to play out in terms of what gets presented to the town council. Now, 3 years ago, what was presented was here's information on the stretch code. And by the way, there was no workshop, but just to vote to do all the other work to apply to be a green community. And they did not pass that. It was a tie vote. So I don't know whether Mark would say, yeah, maybe that's what we ought to do again, and maybe, but there needs to be that discussion. Ultimately, that decision is going to be made by the town council in connection with the town manager, I think.
It would seem that the town has no appetite for not for moving forward with the municipal energy reduction plan, which is one of the four, basically because we had a good one, but it timed out. So we have to go back, and it's not an easy process. It takes.
Yeah, Gordon, I don't know on your computer, but you froze. So if
I'm sorry, you're freezing on my computer. So
you are freezing on our computers too, Barry.
okay. I for the next meeting, there's a room where I'm right next to the router. Maybe I'll do that. I apologize. But Gordon, could you repeat what you said?
Okay. So I said that the town has, the town, like David Anthony and Mark Ells, have no real appetite of going into this unless the stretch code is passed first. They're not going to spend $10,000 in 2 months to redo the municipal energy plan to have it put on the shelf again.
I don't know that. And I'm trying to get a better, so trying to get a better sense about really how much work needs to be done, because what's different from last time is that we have much more of the data that's together.
Yeah, it would be an easier process. You're right, because Sean is there.
Yeah, and the other thing is my understanding, I haven't checked this recently, but they basically said they're going to take a more lenient approach in reviewing applications. So
okay.
Yeah.
I know last time we got a $10,000 grant from Cape Light Compact that paid for the municipal.
Oh, okay.
For us.
David was by himself though. He was doing it. He didn't have Sean.
No, I don't think he did. Right.
And they have updated some of the information in terms of the utility accounts. It's not, live that they could just click it on and get the, get the immediate baseline of where are we right now, but it's a lot better. That's one of the things Sean has worked on over the last 2 years was cleaning up those accounts.
Oh, good.
So it won't be tomorrow, but it won't be as tedious as it was last time. And I don't know about you, Barry, but I certainly got the impression from David Anthony, that he was pretty gung-ho about trying to, do whatever was needed to make this a viable vote this time. I think he's in favor.
There's also at the end of June deadline to apply. I mean, there are two applications a year,
Okay, all
but
right.
that gives us a couple months if we move forward quickly with it. Also,
I guess the other thing that, and this is a conversation with, so just to give a little context, when we met with David, we had the meeting with him, and then he had another meeting, and then we finished the meeting just with Sean. So we're trying to get a better
We're losing you,
and we don't want to be in the middle of
David.
this. David and Sean will be dealing directly with DOER.
Okay. So can I ask a question about the vehicle
Here,
policy? Is the vehicle policy updated? Do we have
Yes.
to pass a new one?
I haven't heard that. So I did. Yeah, there was an updated vehicle policy. I shared that with David and Sean. This was a while back, and Sean's response is he didn't think there would be a problem complying with that.
And I've even asked him since our meeting last Thursday, I said, is the really big piece the energy plan? And he said, yes, that the others were. This is emailing with Sean. I was trying to get a sense of how much work was involved. But Gordon, I think if you think you're the town councilor, so I mean, we'd like it to be voted on as far along as possible, but you're the advisor for us on whether we ask for.
I would like to, yeah, thank you. So did I interrupt? I'm sorry.
No, I just
Oh,
think
okay.
that if you think we should pass the green community first, that's great. But, I think Barry's trying to work closely with Mark Eld and David and try to figure out which makes the best sense from their perspective, but you're the council, so.
My proposal would be to pass the stretch code, to accept the stretch code as the building code for the town of Barnstable, and then instruct the town manager to finish the application and submit it.
And then it's up to you to discuss that with the other counselors. I mean, we present the information, but then you guys decide what's the best way to address it. That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, I think from a timing standpoint, we have this workshop in just a little over a month. And the work needs to be put into that to make sure we do the best job we can. What's done afterwards, we have more time, I think, to work on that.
Yeah.
So I guess from my standpoint, whatever makes the most sense, and I would prioritize what makes the most sense to get to the finish line, as opposed to the timing of that. But
yeah. So
yeah, and this is not going to be won't be a slam dunk. Let me put it this way. There are people that are opposing, and Brian Florence does not want to be part of the workshop because he said that if he were, he would speak in opposition.
So which is interesting because he was favorable. I mean, on some level, he was favorable to the stretch code last time, based on the fact he said, I would do this, but I want you to give me a chance to write my own stretch code and and develop a HERS rating system in our town. But it said, if mine doesn't work, then let's go with, I'm going to find that language, what he said, because he was,
yeah, I mean,
but he also has a visceral dislike for the stretch code that goes beyond rationality. Can I say that out loud in the meeting? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and there are going to be others who will likely oppose it as well. But yeah. So,
well, that's I talked to Dan Lewis, who's a green architect, and he lives in Centerville now, but he's been the president of the American Architects State Association, and he builds green, but he builds non-green too. And he said, when I asked him for a comment on this, he said he doesn't like regulations. He thinks we should absolutely be a green community, but he doesn't like regulations. So he didn't want to talk either on the code. So I think a lot of folks think that there's too many regulations, or the regulations are too cumbersome, or whatever. So people can have kind of nuanced opinions.
Yeah. And I think that's the position of the HERS rater, is to say, here's how the whole system's going to, these systems are going to integrate and work together. I think maybe we need more workforce training to train installators, to train, installers. I think that's a problem, is finding people who can do that.
Yes. Yep. That is a problem.
But we've got 14 towns that already do that. And most of these builders don't work in one town.
Yes, that's a good point.
So anyway, so this is a good discussion. I will, I guess I'm going to be away for a while. I will try to get in touch. I'll definitely try to get in touch with Mark Ells before I leave, and try to sort of get a sort of communicate probably a clearer view of really what's going on, particularly with the energy plan. And I think there's time for discussion, from a staff and a town council level as to, what to do following the workshop.
Okay.
But I think the workshop is going to be critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry, if I could, Kristen, if you don't mind, do you have any concerns that we're not addressing, that you think questions? I think you suggested somewhere along the line, when we've been talking about this the last few months, that we have like a frequently asked questions, or a list of issues to address. And I just wonder if there are other things that we're overlooking that you might want to contribute, that we should have prepared for the workshop, either present or have prepared answers.
I mean, I think that Gordon's suggestions are good. And I mean, he was there for the last conversation and knows kind of what maybe didn't go so well. And also he knows the new council members and probably what they would be looking for. I mean, I think the only other thing is, I mean, I feel like I have a fairly good attention span. I'm just keeping that in mind, that you have some counselors that might be ready to vote on the second we get up there and move on, and then others that want to be informed. So I think it's a balance between the two, but giving the relevant information. And the only other comment I'm going to make is, I did speak to one builder who builds a lot in town, and I asked him about the stretch code, and his comment was, I'm all for it as long as it doesn't cost me money. So I leave that with you, as far as, the point being is it might cost you more money now, but less down the road. So I think you just want to make that point for those people where the argument is going to be about the money. Because like Gordon says, if they're building in the left and right of us, then that's not such a big deal. It's not like we're having them learn a new language or something to get their job done. I think it comes down to the dollar and cents of things. So. Yeah.
And Kristen, what I'm trying to get a better sense of, and I talked to Bob Riley, who built for Habitat for Humanity, and it's kind of reflected in the analysis that DOER did, is that it gives you flexibility to make decisions about basically where you spend your money. You can, if you use heat pumps, you may be able to expensive windows, for example. And so, the HERS rater helps in terms of this sort of cost benefit analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a builder, I don't know, but I can imagine there are some other people on the dais who are in the building industry, kind of in their roles. And I mean, maybe Gordon could just speak to, if he feels that maybe they were in opposition to this, and whether maybe they've softened on it, or so. I think it's like going back to the points that the other council members that were there, what their objections were, and making sure that those are addressed because of the new changes that have come through. So, you know, but I have faith that you guys will get it done.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful, and
Yeah, thanks.
maybe we'll have discussion. And frankly, one of the things that's changed is that using, heat pumps were really not, my understanding, as a commercially viable and acceptable alternative as they were 3 or 4 years ago with cold climate heat pumps. So that's really right now more accepted alternative to using gas, which would often be used with the base code.
So Barry, another alternative way to think about it is if we have to go back and retrofit houses, which we have to retrofit, 80% of the houses on Cape Cod. That's one of the reasons why our electric rates are going up, is because we're paying for our electric rates, we're paying for incentives to retrofit insulation and heat pumps and different ways to make all of our housing stock more energy efficient. So if we can turn the tide a little bit and make them energy efficient from the beginning, then later on down the road, it won't cost us 6 times as much to retrofit them. We have to think about it as a bigger societal, instead of, one builder having to pay enough $1,000 more.
Right.
So as we look at the big picture.
Okay, that's a good thought.
I have a question as the newer person of the committee.
Sure.
I've been following and I'm trying to learn as quickly as I can, as fast as I can. So as I understand it, it costs the builder more to install these energy efficient upgrades. In return, they push that onto the consumer. So the consumer is actually the one paying the builder more money, correct? And then in the end, the consumer saves money on their bills in the long run. Am I looking at it right or wrong?
Not necessarily. So this is so if you look at if you're talking about new construction, because they're different.
Sure.
If I were to summarize what the DOR analysis indicates, is that because you have different constructions, but using heat pumps, if you use, for example, ductless heat pumps, you're using heat pumps instead of air conditioning and a furnace. You don't have ducts. You also, because of the nature of the stretch code, you don't have to build according to a prescribed, this kind of insulation, this kind of windows, as long
Right.
as you achieve a certain result. So there are some savings in the equipment. There are savings in the flexibility potentially. So their analysis shows a reduction. There are some other analysis that
Reduction in the building cost, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And then there are also some Cape Light compact savings as well. There was other analysis that I saw that the Wentworth Institute did, and it showed a modest increase in costs, but no savings according to the flexibility. And it was also based, I think, on an older base code. So you can have different estimates, but frankly, I thought a flaw in their analysis, they didn't consider the impacts of the Cape Light compact or mass save rebates. So if you were to consider that and the tax benefits, it would be basically a wash. And if you look at the DOR analysis, actually, it's a cost reduction.
But the operating and maintenance will be less expensive.
Well, the maintenance may be less, but because you're using electricity, they're showing a modest increase in energy costs, annual costs, but also you would be paying a lower mortgage payment because of a lower capital cost. So the analysis is different than it was 3 or 4 years ago, because I think people were just looking at using gas against gas, but having to pay more for insulation and ceiling and stuff. So and that's one of the reasons that there's a fairly significant difference than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
So what's the biggest pushback from the builders then? Is it their profit margin is thinner?
Well, I think it's going to be who you talk to.
Which builder you
I'm
talk
trying to
to.
get a sense of that, but I think it's, well, what happened last time was simply a grader. I have to do a separate inspection, maybe, and it's outside my control, and that's just more work for me and presumably more cost, even though typically the customer pays for the first rater. I think you're going to get a sort of a spectrum.
It depends on the builder, though, like Barry
It
said.
depends on the builder. So that, I talked to, the Habitat for Humanity, and basically they operate, I think, like any other builder, except they get free carpentry from volunteers. Other than that, I think it's pretty similar. But the way they look at it, the HERS rater helps them in making decisions, and they're also working for Mass Save. So they work on both sides of this to make decisions that will meet the standards, performance standards, and at the lowest cost. And they consider the Mass Save incentives in doing that. And without getting more complicated, Mass Save has different levels of incentives based on how stringently you built to.
Right.
And they say, okay, well, if it costs me $5,000 more to build in X or Y, but I'm getting $7,500 in rebates, then I'll do that.
Right.
If I only get $2,000 in rebates, then I probably won't do it.
And
Yeah, I think they did a great job with the Cape Light Compact presentation a couple of weeks ago at the meeting there. I followed that very well. I'm just trying to understand where the pushback is, because in my experience, if you can find where the pushback is and get ahead of that, it makes getting the push through a little easier.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing. So the pushback last time, and I think Dave Anthony agreed with this, or sort of the practical issues with using HERS raters. It create additional complications. What happens if you don't pass the test? What happens if the appliance don't show up? In practice, this has not really materialized. There's a lot more experience, and that nobody was seeking a change to the rules for HERS raters like they did, I mentioned, with Passive House. The other thing is the economics. And I think what's really changed, the primary change here is we're looking at heat pumps as opposed to gas as an yeah. So I think it's even from what I've seen, it's either pretty much of a wash when you include the Mass Save rebates, or it's significantly less expensive. So yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Ron, I would like to tell Ron about Allison Alessi, who's an architect who builds mostly green. She builds a lot of passive. She was on this committee for years, right, Gordon? Before I came on, and she's been a fan of this green community all along. And she talked to our committee, I think it was in May or June, said she's built about 60 homes where she's worked with HERS raters. And in her experience and her client's experience, it was always helpful because they pointed out, design issues or whatever that were, that had been overlooked or not properly designed. And so she was, in favor before, but still in favor of it with quite a lot of experience, and also pointed out that, like, I think several people have already said, many of these builders are not just building in one town.
Right.
So they're already following these procedures everywhere in every other town on the Cape. So it's not like, this is a big lift for them. They already have to do it if they build anywhere besides Barnstable.
It's like a field trip when they get to come to Barnstable.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a customer, you know, I like that you have a performance test that shows that the insulation and everything you put in, it checks out, both in terms of energy efficiency and the ventilation. That is required. That's, you know, what the HERS raters do. It's required. That gives me the comfort that I'm getting what I paid for.
Absolutely.
Do we?
So-
And I know, Barry, I know you mentioned this at some point of like what these savings would be. I think maybe it was Jane who said over the course of a 30-year mortgage to use as a point of reference. And one of the most impactful slides that I think I give in my talks on climate is the fact that, you know, a dollar spent on mitigation and adaptation saves $7 in recovery costs. And with $1 billion disaster every 2.5 weeks,
Right.
that is one hell of a return on investment. So if you have those figures, to Ron's point, I think, you know,
Yeah.
we can get out ahead of that.
Yeah, I think really focusing on the finances and not on, you know, the boogeyman of climate change that some people get all twisted up again. Focusing on the finances and focusing on health and focusing on national strategy, you know, strategic concerns with climate change. I think a lot of these things are really, we can hit a lot of things that aren't as much politicized as climate change now. You're not allowed to
Yeah,
say.
but I think, you know, having Chris talk to the, you know, in 5 minutes, I think is important, because that's really what is behind the town
Well,
policy.
no, and I'm not saying not to, but
Yeah.
even in his talk that was on
Yeah.
climate change, I think pointing out that particular slide, Chris, I think is really a very good idea.
Is there one, but with one of your connections, they have Jane with the builder, you know, or Barry, your connection with at Habitat. Have they crunched the numbers over time of how much this will save an individual homeowner?
Well, Habitat builds, you know, the only affordable houses.
Right.
And this particular Habitat location, the Cape Cod Habitat, is the most energy efficient habitat unit in the entire country. They probably have, though. We could ask that, and Allison probably has as well. We could ask her that specifically.
I mean, I know
I think that would be helpful.
They're saving on volunteer hours. I get that, and I know that brings down the cost, is what we talked about, Barry, at lunch. But I mean, if you can get some tangible number, I really think that could be helpful to.
Okay, I can follow up. I will tell you that you can get into a discussion about numbers on this, and the numbers are going to be different. And you can say, well, yeah, the DOR study, they looked at Worcester costs, and you would think the relative costs probably, you know, which is would be similar for Cape Cod, but you know, there are limits to what you can do with the data. Yeah.
I think the U.S. Green Building Council has numbers like this, Chris. I can poke around with them a little bit, because they've been building ahead of codes for years, and now a lot of the codes are catching up with them, but they have a lot of financial data, both on terms of building and in terms of operating and maintenance for all types of buildings.
All right. Now, I was wondering if we could move on to some other topics at this point. We've been at this for almost an hour or so. Well, let me just say that for food waste, John Solomon is not here. But does anyone have any update for that? So just to kind of where things stand, that John and I guess Ron volunteered to go to the town transfer station and talk to people about composting food waste, or to give them the buckets that are being given out with some compostable bags, but we were waiting for the weather to warm up. I know if someone came up to me and wanted to have a conversation in 25-degree weather, I probably wouldn't be too interested. So, anyway, all right, do you have anything you'd like to talk to us about?
Barry cut out. Is that me? Climate?
Yes,
No, I don't have anything tonight. And I do have to jump off everyone at 6.
okay, you've got 3 minutes.
So yeah, so I have nothing prepared today.
Okay, good. All right, all right. Jane, air quality, you wanna?
Just that it's related to what we're doing with the green communities, because I think most of the towns on the Cape that have gotten money from the state have used it for indoor air quality improvements in schools. They've worked on their HVAC system and their indoor air quality. So that was something I talked offline a little bit with Sean about, and that was part of his plan. Whether or not they still get that money that he had gotten for the high school is unclear right now, but it was going to be a lot of improvements in indoor air quality. And that's directly related to health and productivity, whether it's schools or businesses or town hall or whatever.
All right. Let's move on to new business, or anything else about air quality? No.
Nothing.
All right. I don't have any additional update. I'll just open it up to anybody, whether they have anything. Okay.
Well, Barry, at some point, I'm going to bring to the town leadership. Sean has written a policy from, he's compiled a policy from different places like South Portland, Maine, and for putting EV charging stations into new housing developments. Just, what the requirements would be. Some of them, there's a certain percentage that should have the electric panel upgraded and the conduits put in, and it goes back to what Chris said, whether the number is 1 to 7 or 1 to 6, you save, if we do it later, if you do it during construction, you save, it's so much easier than trying to work on it later on. So that's just something I'm going to bring up to town council. Some of the actual plug-in stations should already be there and ready to go. And some of them should be in the ground and ready to be hooked up. So that's just something I'm working on.
That's actually a California state requirement. Anytime
probably
you do
is, yeah.
significant renovation, you have to be EV charger ready. You don't have to necessarily put the charger
Yeah.
in. You have to have the 240
Right.
plug.
And
ready
it depends,
to
and
go.
different towns have different limits. So maybe Jane and you and I can sit and look at the numbers someday.
Okay.
Okay.
I can, having gone through this myself, I would say if you're building multifamily,
Yeah.
you definitely want to do this up front, or make sure that the capacity is there. And with an individual home, I think their new homes are now building 200 amp systems. Most of the older homes have 100 amps, so I had to upgrade mine for my different projects. And it is expensive. So what I'm not sure about, Gordon, is with what they're putting in anyway for capacity for new home construction, whether that's less of a problem.
Yeah, no, we didn't touch that. We stayed with units that are building more than 11 projects that are more than 11 units.
Okay.
And I think there will be something in the stretch code that may.
I think there is something in the stretch
Yeah,
code.
but yeah, so Sean has looked at that also and sort of, so it's more for larger projects at the moment.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Gordon,
Yes.
you missed my proposal to put a charging station in my driveway and charge neighbors for it. And nobody liked it.
You can do that, can't you?
No,
Not as a business.
the town will
Oh.
not permit me that.
Maybe you could condoize it or something. Have multiple owners. Put it under an LLC. I don't know. So, but like Sean Hogan lives in 850 Falmouth Road across from the intermediate school. They advertised EV charging and they don't have a single EV charger. He can't buy an
Oh.
EV car because he can't take it home and charge it. I mean, he could.
Just make sure if you start an LLC, you're ready to pay the LLC filing fee every year, $500 straight up.
Well, that's right. Kristen knows that from her business,
And
right?
you're gonna need some LLC documents. I mean, maybe.
Right,
can
there
get
you
that
go.
Really cheap, but it's not as easy as just saying you're an LLC.
Well, Kristen, you're better with an LLC than an S corporation. I started my company before LLCs were common.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
I'm just saying, all of it's money spent. It's like you can't just hang your shit and go like a sole prop. So it gets more complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. The agenda for the next meeting, we'll just use kind of go through the same format, I guess. The assigned tasks, I guess I've asked Jane to work on, her presentation for the workshop.
Mhm.
There were a number of things that I said I will do, which I will do. Chris has left, so it's easy to put more stuff on him, but no, he's working on his presentation for the workshop. So I think that's it, unless anyone.
I'd be happy to take a look at, anyone's presentation that wants to run something by me, or maybe say, hey, what do you have for questions based
that
on
would be
this as,
great.
kind of
That'd be-
a more lay
That'd be
person
great,
to
Ron.
all of this.
And Ron, if you want to find out more about what the Tech Council is doing with
I
broadband,
do, yeah,
the
I have that on my
infrastructure
list.
committee meeting is tomorrow morning.
Okay,
I'm actually teaching a course at exactly the same time, but I could introduce you by email to the people running that, and I'm sure you'd be welcome to join
okay,
as a member of this committee, just to see what's going on, because they focus on that a lot. That's kind of the number one project that committee is that organization is working on beside their programming. So
yeah, no, that would be perfect.
I'll introduce you to some of the folks, and the executive director and the head of that committee, and tell them that you're interested and you might come in as an observer or guest or whatever.
Absolutely, thank you.
Sure.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn. I'm getting hungry. I don't know about you. Rob,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
okay.
Second.
Good. All right, all in favor?
Second,
Aye.
third.
Okay, great. We are adjourned. Kristen, thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Yep.
Take care. Yep. Bye-bye.